Hello, here we are again. This is October 14th, 2018, and this is another live stream for a question and answer session for my cardigan knitting along. It's called It Takes a Guild Cardigan. It's a knit along. Whoops. Hello?
Are you live?
Yes. Okay.
Where?
I'm live, so you can look at my YouTube.
I got it.
Bye.
Okay, I found
Bye-bye.
it. Love you.
I'm winging it alone this time. Usually I have my daughter help me because I am very hard of hearing. And I'm new to doing live streaming, so I had a hard time in the beginning reading your comments at the same time that I'm talking. But I think I'm getting the hang of it, and so she's not going to help me. So we have Bonnie Davis, Kai Lady. Hi, Kai Lady. I'm so glad you could join me. Thank you. Sarah Silver, Sarah Michael from Florida, Mary Inman, Mary from Atlanta, Demetria. Hi, Demetria. I want to meet you in person so bad. Cindy McBride, Susan McBride, KR, Kathleen Wilson from Houston, Lucy Kyle from Houston, Gisela Gracer from Pittsburgh, Cindy Gonzalez. Yay, welcome everybody. So I want to show you the cardigan again. This is the prototype. Actually, this is the third one that I have knit over time. I'm in perfecting my, whoops, the sleeves inside. I wore it all weekend at the retreat. So it is my favorite. Oh, no, it wasn't inside out. It is my favorite sweater to wear. It's super comfortable. So here it is. I know Demetria was really concerned about how that front cable blends in. It blends in really nicely. It just comes right down. You know, I hate it when cables come up and you have increases or decreases and they interfere with the cable itself, and it looks like it was just cut off, or some strange leg starts going up in a weird direction. Here's the other side of the front cable. And I really try hard to have them evolve with the stitches and maintain that structure of the cable. And here is my newest version. I got it started over the weekend. So there's my front cable, and see, it just evolves out. I'll show you up closer. I'm doing my cables in Intarsia. So I've got about a third more of the increases to do for the Raglans. I'm 2/3 of the distance. I've got one, you can see it just needs to go to here. And then the cool thing about doing top-down designs like this is that you can try them on while you're knitting them. So let me see if anybody has two lady homesteaders. Oh, hi, how are you? From Northeast Tennessee. Cindy says she's working on her second swatch. Hi, Katie. Margaret Lyons, Pat Kennedy. Let's see if there's any questions. I have a big stack of questions to answer, all of these. And I put them in order by topic. I think I'll be able to get to all of them. Hello, Delise. How are you? Diana Danko. Hi, how are you? Some of these people I know from the Master Hand Knitting Program. Let me tell you, that's the best thing I ever did for my knitting. So this is where I am in process. That's my back neck cable. And see, it's not very wide. It's not as wide as my neck. And I'll talk about, you know, why I'm saying the back neck width for your cable. This is my back neck cast on. From here to here is the back neck. And you can see it's actually wider than my neck. My neck comes to here. It's actually an inch wider on each side. So that I take that into consideration in the designing of this. So let me just start right out with the questions, answering them. Let me see here. If I miss your question because they scroll up the side of my screen, just post it again. It's okay, you know, so that I can see it. If I don't answer your question, I seem like I miss it. My carpet's rolling up. Okay, here we go. So this is from Owl C, and she says, are the 8th and 9th images on my page for the page for the pattern on Ravelry. They are now included in the document. So she was wondering about that. And she wanted to know which cables were used on my sweater. So I took that out because you can just look at them and tell. And it doesn't really matter because you can choose whatever cables you want to do on your sweater. So this is from Miss Lacey Rose. She says, I'm considering my next ITAG in a particular super yarn wash that usually grows only slightly. However, this same yarn stretched exponentially in a bias knit shawl. We're not knitting this bias, so it shouldn't, that shouldn't be a problem. But what I would say is when you knit your swatches, you know how I tell you to carry them around with you and feel them and manipulate them before you measure your gauge. That's the most important thing to do. And I have one lady in my knitting group that carries hers around in a plastic bag. I would take it out of your plastic bag because that's protecting it. You don't want to protect it. You want it to see what happens when it's under normal daily use. So be a little rough with it. It's okay. You're going to be rough with your sweater when you're pulling it on your sleeves, and it, you know, it needs to withstand that. So do that to your swatch too. And Sue M says, where are we in process? I am still trying cable swatches. We haven't cast on yet, so you're not behind. In fact, you'll never be behind because this is not a race. Nobody's trying to be out front. It's a process. It's an adventure. It's a journey. The width of the button bands I will be addressing. I have that in. If you ask the question on Ravelry in the questions for this video, I have them all here, and I'll be going through those again in the order that they present themselves in the sweater construction. I think that makes the most sense. Okay, this one is from Sweet Jane 11. She says, if the needle size I chose gives me a denser knit, which I like, should I go up a size needle to prevent the cables from being too tight with the denser fabric? The only way you can answer that is by knitting your cable swatch and seeing if you like the fabric in the cable swatch. You just have to swatch. I'm sorry. That's what you got to do and see. And you might be able to compromise, go halfway and be seen between size needle between the two. Most of the sweater is going to be in stockinette stitch. That's the majority of the fabric. So if that's the fabric you like, you really might want to lean towards that. Be sure to block your swatches and manipulate them, carry them around with you before you take your gauge and before you decide which ones you like the most. This is from Ibi Ubi. Suzanne mentioned seaming the sleeve and side backs to the fronts, blah, blah, blah. I am sorry, that was a misstatement on my part. There are no seams in this sweater. So don't be freaked out about seaming. We're not going to be doing any seaming. It's all knit in one piece. The only thing we will be doing is picking up stitches for the button band. And we'll discuss the button band and the width in just a minute. So let's see. What's the width? Okay, so where are we in? Carolyn Nichols. Hello, Carolyn. She was at the retreat with me this weekend. North Georgia. I didn't block my cable swatch because I found my gauge didn't change at all from my stockinette stitch. Was that not smart? I would block your cable swatch. I would block all of your swatches because you cannot tell what the fabric's going to look like till after they've been blocked. You are going to wash your sweater someday, right? So if you plan on washing your sweater, you need to know how the fabric's going to react to being wet. Hi, Sandra. Judy, hello. I did have a good weekend. It was very restful because this is the retreat I get to go to, and I don't have to worry about anything. So I did get some rest. This is from Crispy Quilts, and she says, hi, Suzanne, would it be possible for you to do a video on measuring a garment instead of having someone measure your body? Yes, I will do that. In fact, I'm going to add that to my list right now. How to measure a garment. And there's another question on that topic. A garment. Okay, that's on my video list. Okay. This is from Marty Knits On. Roger, you've mentioned teaching this cardigan class a couple of times in person. How can we find those students' projects on Ravelry? I'd love to see what others have done with this design. They'll post their projects. Maybe I'll have them put a special tag on their project. And then you can search them by the tag. we'll talk about that in my class this week. Okay, this is Marty Knits On. She says, I have 2 questions. One, if we've used a loved, well-fitting purchased sweater for chest circumference, can we also use that sweater's other measurements? Yes, you can use all of them. Where can we find knitter's graph paper? This is an excellent question. Just Google knitter's graph paper. There's several places online, and you can put in your stitch and row gauge and print it out, and it's free. So just Google knitter's graph paper. If you want to buy some, then go to Amazon or someplace like that and put in knitter's graph paper. I buy books of it, and I like those. I use them a lot. And but you don't need knitter's graph paper to chart a cable design. You just need to chart it. Just need little squares, 1/4-inch squares or something will work fine. Because what's going to tell you your stitch and row gauge is your swatch. And the knitter's graph paper, you're going to have different stitch and row ratio for stockinette than you do for your cable swatch. So I wouldn't worry about the knitter's graph paper right now. But if you want to find it, you can look for it on Google. This is from Miss Lacey Rose again, and she says, regarding the armhole depth, I was wondering, why don't we add ease to that measurement? The only measurements that we need to add ease to are the arms and the body, the chest circumference and the hips, because that's the lateral ease. For example, we don't need to add ease to a neck. If we added ease to the neck, your neck opening is going to get really big. You don't want to do that. And we don't need to add ease to length, because if we did, then the arms would be too long. And if we added ease to the length of the body, it would be too long. And if we added ease to the armhole depth, it would be too low. So the whole sweater hangs on this part right here, the upper body. So if your stitch gauge, your row gauge is going to stretch from weight, it's going to be this part right here where the sweater's hanging from your shoulders. So your armhole depth, if we take an actual armhole depth, most likely 99% of the time, it's going to be deeper just simply from the weight of the sweater hanging from your shoulder. So we can actually use the actual measurement, and it'll probably be 1 inch deeper. Now, if you make your armhole depth, like this is pretty much the depth of my armhole is this top I have on. When I lift my arm up, it does not lift the side of my shirt up, because my arm has full range of motion right here. It pivots right here. The armhole pivots. But if I pull the armhole down and we have a deeper armhole, when I lift my arm up, look what it does. It's going to lift the whole side of my shirt up with my arm, because the pivot point is now down here too low. So when you go like this, and I can tell you the bottom of my shirt just came up about 3 inches. I'm not going to show you because you'll see my skin. But can you understand that concept? So you don't want to add ease to your underarm. Let me see what I'm missing here. Hi from the Pacific Northwest. Sarah Michael, how do you determine how much ease to add? As the pattern is updated, would it be possible to put the dates on the, I am putting the dates on the revisions. From this previous one forward, you will have the full document with the most recent date for the document, and then I'll tell you which pages are new. So you only need to print those pages or look at those new pages, okay? If I made any corrections on previous pages, I'll list what page the correction was on and what the correction was. I hope that helps you. I know it can get really confusing. Let's see, I hope you're having a productive week, and I am. For the hips, I would like to add slits on either side so the sweater does not pull in under my hips. I'm making it a bit longer. I don't do ribbing that pulls in, so I don't think you're going to need to worry about that. And if you did put slits and the ribbing pulled in, you would have come down and then your ribbing would come in like this, and it wouldn't look very attractive. So when we get down to the ribbing, we'll talk more about that. I don't use that concept of going down a couple needle sizes for the ribbing. So I like my ribbing to come straight down from the sweater. I don't like it pulling in. That's kind of a 50s, 60s style, not the current style, but a lot of people still continue that practice of using smaller needles for ribbing. And I also will teach you about getting keeping your knits to the correct size when you're changing from knits to purls, because that's where the knits get enlarged and the ribbon gets bigger. So we'll talk about that when we get to the bottom part of the sweater. It's a good learning exercise. Okay, so let's go to the next question. This is from Fiddle Beads. Will your method for non-whole number stitches per inch work for 7.5 stitches per inch? Also, yes. When I swatched, blocked, and weighted, I got 7 stitches per inch with a US 2.5 needles, but prefer the fabric with the US 2 needles, which gives me 7.5. And I'm using sport weight wool. That sounds good. Those sounds like good 7.5. I'm getting on my sweater that I'm knitting here that I showed you that I had on my shoulders, I'm getting 7 stitches per inch, and that is fingering weight yarn. So sport's just a little bit heavier. 7.5 is fine if you like that fabric. And I'll show you in an upcoming video that I'm probably going to do tomorrow on how to use Anne's book and how to move between needle stitch sizes and circumference sizes. So I'll be discussing that. You can do that. Yes, it works really good. And we don't need to worry so much about the stitches per inch. What we're really going to be ballparking is the stitches per circumference of the body parts, or the intended finished size of the sweater, not the body parts. I misspoke. That was wrong. Of the finished size of the sweater. So there's a difference between measuring our body, and we filled in the chart for the body measurements, and then our schematic. The body is our direct measurements of our body without any ease. On the schematic for the arms and the chest, we add ease. We do not add ease to any of the length measurements or the back neck measurement. So when I talk about stitches, total stitch count for a part, we're talking about the schematic part. Okay, I might misspeak and say body part, but really when we're talking about total stitch counts, we're going to be talking about the schematic parts. Okay, this is from Flit 2. In your cable without a cable needle, a comparison of 2 methods video, you showed 2 methods. Can you please explain what the difference is between the 2 methods and why you prefer the second method you demonstrated? Is the finished cable crossing the second method less tight because of the additional yarn stranded across the slip stitches? The 2 methods produce exactly the same results. Even though it looks like it's stranded across, it's not. It moves over. There's no more yarn used. I've actually worked these cable crossings and taken them out and measured the length of yarn used. There's absolutely no difference whatsoever. I prefer the second method because there are less movements involved. And so I think it's more efficient of use of my movements. They both look exactly the same, no difference. Venus 72, I have a question regarding the cable panel. The cable I've chosen is 16 stitches across, but they are shown on a background of reverse stockinette stitch. So I was wondering how many purl stitches to do between the stockinette stitch of the body and the cables. I can swatch, but I guess it will look different on a full-size garment. That's an excellent question. Let me show you on my little sample, wherever it went. Here it is. Okay, so on the back cable, I allow 2 purl stitches between the cable and the stockinette stitch. So this cable is in reverse stockinette stitch. And then there's 2 cables between the outside edge, the widest part of the cable. There's 2 purl stitches, not 2 cables, 2 purl stitches between the outside edge. That's for the back panel. That's proportional. I think it looks good. For the sleeves, I have this on 3 needles so I could put it on. I just use 1 because the cable width is narrower. And so there's only 1 purl column on either side. If there were 2 purl columns, it would be too wide in proportion to the cable and would not look good. Same with the front cable. And Dimitri will like this. Do you see how I brought the cable stitches in? This is the Intarsia. But you can see the cables. I'm just showing you this because you can see, and there's 1 purl column on either side of that cable. So see, the whole cable actually starts up here with the reverse stockinette stitch. And then when I got enough reverse stockinette to start adding in the cable, I started. So this is just reverse stockinette stitch to here. Then I added one stitch, and then on the next right side row, I added a second, and then a next right side third and a fourth until I had my 4 stitches for my cable. Then I started work, and I matched this cable crossing so it's on the same row as a cable crossing here, so that when I get down to the bottom of my sweater, they'll all match up. That's called finishing. You do finishing at the beginning of your knitting. So I'm planning ahead, and that'll lead into another question in a minute. Let me show you on the blue sweater. On the blue sweater, it's the same way. The back cable, I have 2 columns of purls on each. That's the exact same cable that I'm using on the gray and orange sweater. So I have 2 columns of purls on either side, and it looks proportional, it looks okay. And then over here on the sleeve, I have 1 column, and see, that looks proportional. It's all about visual effects. So this is like art. You know, you have to have an eye for it, but I'm helping you do that, okay? I'll give you guidance. Let me see. I would like to add sets, plays, and memes. I got an ad on here. Yucko. Janet. Hi, Janet. Thank you. I'm glad that you made it home safely, too. She was also at the retreat. Okay, let's see the next question. This is from Kai Lady. Not sure I understand what is meant by the arm and chest measurements falling in the same range. So in the book, let me get my book. Okay. On the schematic page for the adult, for child, it has the child, adult. I don't know, you're not going to be able to see this. Okay, so this is the page for the schematic that we're going to be referring to. Okay? I have Ann Bud's permission and Interweave Knit's permission to show this to you and to use it. Whoops, I'm getting funny light thing there. Let me see if that helps. No, that's not working. Okay, so anyway, there'll be a video of that. You want to have if you look in there, find your finished chest circumference from your schematic. Find that, or the one nearest to it, and see which size range it falls into. For example, my finished chest circumference is going to be 40 inches. So I found 40 inches. Then it was the 3rd size over in that size range for that schematic. So then I found my upper arm, and my arm is 12, and I add 2 inches for ease, so that's 14. So in my size range for the 40 chest circumference, they say 14 and a half. So I'm very close to that. But what if my upper arm was 16? I'm not in the 40-inch size range anymore. My arm is now in a different size range. And that's what we're going to talk. We're going to learn that this week. And we're going to learn how to compensate for that, because many people have a larger arm. They may be muscular or whatever, that maybe they have lymphedema because they've had a mastectomy on that side and their arm has lymphedema and it's bigger. So things are tighter on that arm. We can compensate for that. And you can do the arms differently. I have one lady in Bakersfield that I've worked with that had breast cancer, and she has one arm bigger than the other. So we made her sweater fit her. You can do that. Let's see. If you don't want the cable down the back, you can leave it out. You can leave all the cables out. Some people are getting freaked out about cables and reading charts. Just leave them out. This isn't about cables. This lesson is not about cables. It's about how to knit a sweater. If you want to add cables, you can learn to add cables. But if they're beyond your level at this point, or your ability to imagine it or see what it's going to look like, so you're concerned about it, just leave them out. It's okay. Does the back cable add stability or just increase drag? It doesn't do either. The back cable doesn't do anything. It's just decorative. Hello, Ruth. Hi. I see some of my favorite people on here. It's so cool. Okay, let me go to the next question. This is from Hope in a Stitch. When you say the back cable width is your back neck measurement, is that with or without ease? So my back neck measurement is like 4 inches. But my neck opening is going to be 6 inches. I like to use the back neck width or narrower for the back cable because I think it looks proportional down your back. It's just a proportion thing. If you start getting it too wide, it's going to detract from the overall sweater. It's going to become about the cable. If you have proportion, and so this is like a third type thing, it looks nice. So let's see. Thank you, Dolise, for answering. Yes, you can leave it out. And it's okay to do that. You don't get a thumbs down for doing that. It's okay. Everybody can do their own. This is your choice. It's personal preference. This is from Artie Rowe. I'm using fingering yarn. My cable number C seems really small and is only 3 inches wide where my back neck is 4. Should I add a row or 2 of knits on each side of the purls to make it bigger? Also, since I'm using dark gray yarn, I want to add cable legs in color. Will you show us how, and especially the spit splice technique? Yes, I'm going to make a video on doing the cables in Intarsia. Like this. Yes, I'm going to do a cable and I'll show you how to do the spit splice technique. Mine is less than 3 inches wide. Mine is 2 3/4 inches wide, and I'm using this down the center of the back of my sweater. And you can look at that again. I think it looks fine. In fact, while I was at the retreat this weekend, I went ahead and I started this sweater. This is the third start to it, by the way. I added this cable on either side here, and I got down about this far and looked at it, and it was too wide proportionally. It was too much orange. It did not look good. So I just cut it off and started over again. I like it like this. This is 2 3/4 inches wide. That's enough orange down the center of my back. So it's personal preference. It's not a rule. It's just I'm using bulky weight for a jacket, therefore no cable. Okay. So let's look at the next one. This is from Demetria. Suzanne, my cable has only one cross on row 1, a 2/2, and multiple crosses later up to 3 or maybe 4 on 1. So do you compensate just for the cables that cross on row 1? What about the bind off? Also, do we add cable color after casting on with the main color, or do we cast on in 2 colors? You compensate. Cable flare compensation is for each cable leg, not the cable crossings. For each cable leg that you have, just as a generalization, and this is not 100% accurate, but if you don't want to do all the calculations, in-depth calculations, you can use this generalization. Like, for example, if I have 12 stitches, if I have 6 legs, and each is 2 stitches wide, that's 12 stitches. I would cast on 6 fewer stitches and increase 1 for each cable leg. But as you can see, this is my swatch I showed before. This is 40 stitches wide. This is 40 stitches wide. And really, the difference between these two swatches is more than 6 stitches. Okay, let's see, let me line them up. There's the difference up here. This is hanging cattywampus. So it looks like it's about 8 stitches. So really, this particular cable pulls in 8 stitches. So you ideally, if it were a perfect world, you would cast on 8 fewer stitches and then increase by 8 in the first row. But I like my handy dandy little thing. And in all the cables that I published this past week in the pattern, I did that compensation for you in the first row. So let's see, there's some more questions about this. This is from Dana Barbieri. For the cable flare compensation cast on and bind off, would this still work even though there would be no cable crossing at the very beginning and end? Yes, you do 1 for each leg. If it's a 4-stitch cable, you reduce by 2, add 2 back in. If it's 3 on 1, if there's several 3s on a couple of them, I have 1 and add 2, and some I do 2 and add 1. So I just average it out. And wouldn't be a cable across the seam. So that was the same question as Demetria. This is Florestine. Just watch the videos on cable flare. What a revelation. I didn't fully understand how you arrived at the total stitches to cast on for a cable. I understood as a combination of adding for the cables and adding for the purl stitches in between. Guess my confusion is how many stitches one starts with and where to begin adding. This is a function of allocation to cable panel. Yes. So you could do the swatches. You did your stockinette swatch. You did your cable swatch. You can measure the stitch gauge over the cable section. If you were going to do this by measuring stitch gauge, I would measure between these two areas, not including the stockinette stitch, and I would figure out how many stitches I'm getting per inch. Then I would measure this, and I would figure out how many stitches I'm getting per inch, and then I would compare the two. For example, you might be getting 9 stitches per inch or 10 stitches per inch here, and 7 stitches per inch here. So if this is 2 3/4 inches wide, we would multiply 2 3/4 times 3. That's the difference between the stitches, and that's how many stitches you would cast on less, and then add back in the first row. So that's the complicated method of doing it. It's all stitch gauge. Let's see what we got. My finished chest measure is 57, which is not on the chart. I'm going to discuss measurements that aren't on the chart. I have some other people that have the same things. We're going to go by your schematic, and I'll show you exactly how to do it. So I would like you, because I have to read these and they're small print, I can't make it bigger, or maybe somebody can tell how to make. Don't make unnecessary comments, please, because I'm trying to read through these to see the questions that people have. I'm interested, fancy stitch raglan increases rather than just a plain line, leaves along the raglan, for example, not sure what term to choose to reach. Lori, I'm not sure what you're asking that you want to use a fancy stitch raglan increases. Oh, yeah, I do understand that, and I'll show you that. In fact, in the part of the pattern that comes out this week, I show you a whole bunch of different ways of doing raglan increases. It's personal preference. You can choose whichever you want. You can even make cables along the raglan increases if you want. But I'll show you a variety, and you can choose which ones you want. An example is on my newest one. I'm just doing a make one, knit one, and make one. And it kind of makes a lacy little design. On my previous one, I did a make one and then knit two to get knit two and make one. It gives a completely different effect. Do you see that? Just by adding a stitch. So there's 2 stitches between the make ones there and 1 stitch on the other sweater. I'm going to have little samples of all the different ways that you can do that. And yes, KR, her chest size is bigger. Will Intarsia Cables change the gauge from the same cable knit in one color? Yes. So you'll need to do a stitch swatch. That was from Bonnie Davis. Command plus may make your chart type bigger. Let me see that. Is it Shift plus? Oh, cool. It got bigger. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let me go to the next question. This is from Bosim. In update 10, 12, 18, cable C for the back has 6 increases in row 1. The legend says to purl into the front and back of the stitch. Actually, the legend says on the wrong side, and it is on the wrong side that you're working, purl into the front and back of the stitch. Even though that is technically called a knit front and back, but when you do it on the reverse side, which we're doing it on the wrong side of the fabric, it is a purl one front and back. That is the correct annotation for that. I'm sorry if it's confusing. And I did show the knit front and backs in the cable because I think it's simpler for people to do. This is mine, worked that way. I added all of my cables in here with the knit front and back. All of those color are added in, and they look just fine. That's the right side of the work. I worked them in with a knit front and back on this side for each one of the cables. So it looks fine. You can try it on a swatch. Guess what? I like to swatch. Okay. So, Dutchy, I have a question on cable flare compensation. I understand the principle, but I have problems with the casting on. I use a long tail cast on method. The part of the stitch that's used for the increases is so tight that so far I find it impossible to use it properly. So do the knit front and back, which is the purl front and back, okay? Then you don't have to try to pick up that bar. That's one of the reasons that I changed it. It's not so tricky. It's much easier for people to do. So try that one, okay? And she says, ETA, your new cable schemes seem to give an alternative by introducing the setup rows with increases. Yes, they do. So that's why I gave the alternative. But you can use whatever increase you want. I've shown one method in the video, and I show another in the charting of the cables. Zastringer, I have an issue with cabling becoming too tight as I work it, especially if using same size as a stockinette for my gauge. You can try working the cable in a different size needle. You could just have that part of your sweater on a double pointed needle or something like that. And then you would have a separate longer needle over here and a separate longer needle over here. You could try that. Or you could try learning, why is your cable too tight and what can you do to make it a little looser? You might try some of that cabling without a cable needle, that video that I suggested. I think it's in the pattern. There's a link to it. Is there one? Can somebody check? So let's see, let's go to the next question. This is Susan Marie. Hello, Susan Marie. I hope you're on here. She says, since it looks as though the topic of working cables will be coming up very soon, I'd like to suggest that Suzanne discuss fixing the enlarged knit before a purl when working in the round. When we get to working in the round, which we will on the sleeve, yes, I'm going to discuss that. And I'm also going to show you how to manage your change in stitch gauge. Many people have a change in stitch gauge when they change from knitting flat to knitting in the round. So that's another learning opportunity. And we'll wait until we get to the sleeves to discuss that part. Great question. Thank you, Susan Marie. Here's another one from Susan Marie. Is it possible to explain the reasoning behind having the back cable not be wider? And I explained that previously, but she says, my request is because I'm considering a cable pattern that starts out narrower and gets wider. That's okay. I just wouldn't let it get too wide, but some of them are very pretty. They're kind of this shape. So you could have the narrower part be at the top. Then someone asked, this is Kai Lady. She asks great questions. Everybody asks great questions. You guys are really thinking knitters. I really like you. You're my kind of knitters. I haven't seen any more questions or comments after Cindy commented about making my chart type bigger. Can someone make a comment so if I can see if it's working? I may be missing comments. Has anybody made a comment? Okay, Vanita said, okay, there, okay. So people have been listening, they're not typing. Okay, cool. All righty, here, this is from Kai Lady. Will you be advising about how to balance cables so that they begin and end symmetrically from neckline to hemline, so that the pattern at the hemline ends at the same place the pattern begins at the neckline? Yes, I'm going to be discussing that. And if you notice on all the cables that I charted, this is the top down. So this is the cast on here. I charted all of them so they start at a nice point. Did you notice that? Let's see the bind off. So this is this one. See, well, I didn't cable flare compensate up here, but it starts at a nice point. It starts very pretty. This is this one. So this is the cast on edge up here. See, it doesn't start mid cable. It looks good. Yes, we will learn how to balance these at the bottom. Yes, we will do that. All of them I started at a good point. Teresa Brown, my hips are larger than my bust. Will be teaching us where the in length begin increasing for the hips. Yes, and I'm also going to talk, I will talk about waist shaping if people want to talk about waist shaping. We're not going to do bust shaping on this sweater. We can do that at a later time on another sweater because this is kind of a shawl collar and the shawl collar gives it lots of extra space. We don't need to talk about bust shaping, but we can do waist shaping and how to widen for the hips and where to begin and how to do that. Let's see here. Can you address the gray part of a cable chart? Yes, those little gray parts, the little gray stitches, mean 2, there is no stitch in that box. So if you count the stitches across the row, there'll be fewer stitches than in the next row. Usually you see gray boxes next to an increased stitch. So you have to give space for the increase to happen. It happens there where the gray box is. Does that answer your question about gray boxes? Does that make sense? It means nothing's happening there. You just skip from the stitch previous it, you skip the gray box and go to the next box and do what's designated in that box. This is from C. Adams 9101. Question, will my back cable work? Back neck, 5.25 inches, back cable, 34 stitches. She gives her formula, and it all comes out, and it will work. Yes, that will work fine. This is from MOHNL on Ravelry. I have never knit anything using Intarsia. Is this a technique that could be picked up in a project such as this? You can try it on a swatch and see if you like it. I have a yarn I could use that should work perfectly, but I'd want my use of it to be worthy of the yarn quality and the sweater quality. So try Intarsia with some waste yarn on a swatch just for fun and see if you like it. I'm going to be making a video tomorrow on how to do the Intarsia swatch, so you can watch that and you can try it. She considers herself, or he considers himself, to be an intermediate knitter, having knit cables, brioche socks, and Raglan cardigan pullover already. Not sure if that makes a difference. Well, you're an adventurous knitter, and I would try it. I would try it, and you may like it. This is Sock Genius. Will 170 grams of worsted air number 4 be enough for all the cables in color? It depends on whether you're doing just the legs. I think it'd be enough for all of them, because that's almost 2 skeins of Aran weight yarn. That should be enough to do all your cables. Yes. Now, if you want to do your collar in the same color, that might not be enough yarn. TK Art. Hi, Suzanne. Could you show us how to cast on for the Intarsia cables? I will do that in a video. It's not something I can show here. I'd have to hold it up here in front of the camera. So I remember you said your cable, you just cast on 6 strands for the orange, but only used 1 gray strand for the rest. Could you show an example of how you do this? And I just use the gray for the cast on. I don't add the orange until the first row, which is a wrong side row, and that's where I add the orange. And I don't have, and because, so already on this sweater, so here's my cast on for that back cable, Intarsia. And so I doubled all of my strands. So I don't have any ends to weave in here, because I used strands that were about 7 foot long and folded them in half. So they were about 3.5 foot long then. So I started them here. So each one went to its own column of stitches. They did double duty. And then when I was down about here, I needed to add more yarn. I just spliced it onto those strands. So I never have ends to weave in. Do you see that? There are no ends. I haven't woven in any ends. But when I get down to the very bottom of the sweater, yes, I will have these ends to weave in. And there's 6 of them for that cable. So I really focus on eliminating as many ends as possible. Cindy, good. Since knitting top down, do you begin cable design from the original end of pattern in with the original beginning of pattern? Do I flip the pattern? My hip says to put it back. Okay, the yarn calculator is amazing, but have we discussed how much extra yarn you might need for the shawl collar? In the yarn calculator, he adds 1 skein for swatching and 1 skein for the shawl collar and pockets. So there's enough yarn. You should have plenty of yarn if you use that yarn calculator. It's already built into the calculator. What was I talking about before that, though? Oh, Cindy Gonzalez's question. You still start the charts from the bottom up, okay? You read a chart. Here's a little chart here, okay? You always start on the first row. Now that's backwards because I'm showing it to you. So row 1, that really is over on the left side. Okay, it's a wrong side row. This is mirror image of this. See how this is written backwards here? It looks like it's on the right side, but it's really over there on the wrong side. And so you still start from the bottom of the chart and work up, but when you're done, the cable will look like this. So when I pictured those cables, that cable is this one, okay? So here's the cast on edge up here. So if it's a top down sweater, this is the cast on edge. This is what that cable will look like. Now, this particular cable is easy to turn it over. You just flip the sequence of cables. It's a horseshoe cable. So you can do it this way or this way, but not all cables can you do that. So all the cables that I have in the pattern thing, I show the picture of them is with the cast on edge at the top. That's how it would look on your sweater. This is exactly how it would look on your sweater. But the charts are shown this way, okay? Because you're going to knit from the bottom up, and then when you put the sweater on, it'll go this way. But they're all the ones I put in there look just fine both ways. Let's see, the yarn calculators. Oh, got it. Oh, good, Cindy. I'm glad you got it. Okay, let's go to Kai Lady. When setting up for the Intarsia cable, should the contrast color be added on the setup row along with the increases or on the first row? On the first row, and yes, there will be a video for that. And this is Sadie Elizabeth. I'm planning a cable that is one way up as a cornflower cable cushion in Intarsia. Since we're going to be knitting top down, will this mean my design is upside down? Yes. And to get it right side up might take quite a bit of work depending on what the design is. You might want to experiment with it and see if you can get it to look the way you want. If you can't, you might have to pick another cable. But try experimenting with it. And on Ravelry, you can contact me personally, although I hope you don't, because I get between Facebook, Ravelry, and YouTube, it takes me about an hour every morning just to answer everybody's questions or just to reply to people. But Sadie Elizabeth, I give you permission to contact me on Ravelry and send me a picture of the cable that you want to do and let me look, and then I'll give you a definitive answer on whether it's one that you can flip over or not, okay? This is Ronks Knit. Please, can you explain very slowly about the calculations needed for how many stitches to cast on? I've been looking at the charts in the book, and because my gauge is between 4 and 5, actually 4.25, I've done my best to go through each section to adjust the numbers. I'm going to show you how to use Anne's book for the stitch gauges that are in between hers and also for the sizes that are between hers, and that'll be in a video because I need to show the pages of the book to show you how to do that and I'll just go through it and show how to make the changes. It's really straightforward and it's not as difficult as it sounds. This is from Kai Lady. Do you have a preferred cast on for top down sweaters, regular long tail or something stretchier? For top-down sweaters, regular long tail is good. You do not want something stretchier because you don't want the top of your sweater going like this, okay? In fact, a cable cast-on is even good, or a knitted-on cast-on because they're tighter. But a long tail is just fine. Back cable A has the numbered rows starting with row 1 on the left. Does that mean that we start on a wrong side row? Yes. So I put a link in the Ravelry groups, and maybe I'll add one to the next section of the handout that I make to my video about reading a chart. And I'll put a link to that below in this video. There's always the description down below the video. I'll put a link. I might even put a thing up in the corner here or here, I don't know which side it goes on, to the video about reading a chart for you. Okay, Kathleen, there's some basic rules for chart reading, and you can look at that video. If the number is on the left side, that means it's a wrong side row. If the number is on the right side, it means it's the right side row. And a chart pattern can start on either the wrong side or the right side. Any pattern, any charted pattern can start on either wrong side or right side. There's no rule that says it has to start on the right side. Yarn Fanatic 16. So I've checked the chest and arm circumference, including ease, for the size I've chosen, and lucky me, they fall within the range given in Ann Budd's book. What about the back neck measurement? Yes, this is true. Your back neck is going to be narrower because there's got to be room for the shawl collar. So there's about 1 inch on either side because you're going to be picking up stitches around here and knitting. The shawl collar will come up and fold over this way. So that's fine. Okay. Here's another one from Susan Marie. She asks great questions. I'd like to ask for some clarification about a couple of paragraphs on page 24. It says I use the term base. And what I mean by that in the book is the numbers given for that size or that stitch range. Okay, that's the base. And we're going to learn how to change or adjust the base. And you want to see if all of your bases, it says on page 24, then your body, then use the sleeves as your base. And remember, I'll correct that. That's a really good catch of your schematic. It's not body, schematic. Remember in the beginning of this video, I said, sometimes I transpose the two words. From this point forward, we're talking about schematic. I might say body. I'm thinking body of the sweater, not your personal body, but the body of the sweater, and that includes ease. Okay, so let's move forward. Another one from Susan Marie. Will we be choosing our width of button bands before we cast on an increase to the chest circumference? Yes, that's another thing we're going to be doing this week. This week, we're going to be learning about the Raglan decreases and how to adjust the arm to the body. And we're also going to learn, we're going to make our button band 3 inches wide unless you're putting a zipper in. So I'm going to have a 3 inch wide for people with the shawl collar. And then I'll give you, there's nothing, we need to actually make it a little bit wider for the by 1 stitch, not much, for a zipper. And I'll talk about that. And that'll be in the written lesson this week when it comes out on Thursday. Okay, let's move on. Another one, Susan Marie. I posted these 2 questions, but Christian here in the live cable. I'm still at the point of estimating yardage. I have 2 questions about ease. If I know I will never button the cardigan close, should I be considering 0 ease? Or a couple of inches of ease less than the amount of ease I would choose if I were to wear the cardigan buttoned up? I think you're not understanding how the button band works. When you do a button band, you're actually knitting your sweater to this point here because the button band's going to be here. And then you add that button band on both halves and it completely overlaps. The button band overlaps. So even if you're not planning on buttoning it, you still want it to come together, right? So if you're not planning on buttoning at all, you would have your button bands be here, but they would just touch. They would not overlap at all, ever. Now, one of the ladies in my in-person group chose that for her previous sweater. She's knitted this with me before, and she's doing it again, and she chose to not have buttons. And there were a couple people in our new class that were talking about not having buttons, and she said it was a mistake for her because she likes to wear hers when she goes to the beach. And a lot of times here, when we go to the beach, which is about 1.5 hours, 2 hours from here, it's windy over there. And she says she's constantly having to hold her sweater closed, which is not always convenient. She would much rather, she wished she'd put buttons on it. So just to give you an idea there about the buttons. And we'll be talking more about the button band in this week. In a previous video on page 74, does her back neck measurement correspond? No, her back neck measurement corresponds to her back neck plus allowance for picked up stitches and a neck band, which is in our case is going to be the shawl collar. So it's probably 2 inches wider or about 2 inches wider, 1 inch on either side than your neck measurement. Check and see if that makes sense. This is Tish 603. We're doing pretty good. I only have a couple more questions here. In a previous video, Suzanne mentioned that she would tell us how she determines placement of skeins when using hand-dyed yarns. Yes, and that's one that's going to come out this week too because we're getting ready to knit. I'm going to show you how to look at skeins of hand-dyed yarns, how to choose which ones to buy at the store, and then the sequence to use them in your knitting and how to do that, and also how to carry the yarn up from row to row. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a video. Great question. This is from Demetria. Suzanne, I'm going to be doing a zipper and a hood instead, and I'll be answering that too in this when we get ready to do that. When we're talking about the button bands, we'll talk about the difference between what you want for a zipper versus a button band. I like the idea of the zipper. Kai Lady, Suzanne, your last live stream mentioned something about videos that would teach the same info as in your personal boot camp classes. Those are called beginning knitting. If you go to my videos and you look for the video playlist called beginning knitting, those are the videos that I use in my boot camp classes. And I'll review them. There's probably some more I need to add to them that I've made since I first started it. All those videos I made several years ago. Okay, so Kathy Westrand, she says, if we have 2 stitches between the raglan increases, do we need to add 1 to cast on? No, it's just a matter of where we choose to place our markers. You don't need to add any stitches. It doesn't add or detract from the size of the sweater. Any other questions? We're coming close to the end here. Let's see, how long have we been on? 55 minutes. Oh my God, an hour goes by so fast. Does anybody have any other questions? I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it. Thank you. Somebody's spamming us. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm excited. We're going to start knitting here real soon. This person report. Okay, we have a spammer. Okay, I reported them. And Audrey Perry says, thanks so much. I was going to give up, but I think I'll forge ahead. I think that's a good idea. Just having fun says, I'm still getting measurements and I feel a bit behind. Don't worry, none of us have started knitting yet. So you're not behind. Anybody else? Okay. I'll see you in my videos and on Ravelry and Facebook. Oh, by the way, give me a thumbs up on this video. Okay? And I've only gotten 20 thumbs up during this whole hour. You all need to give me a thumb up. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up. That makes me feel happy. And also, share my videos in your social media. Post your questions. Make your comments on this. All these comments that we have during this hour, they go bye-bye when I end the stream. But if you make comments after that, they show up on my YouTube page and everybody else can read your comments. And Vanita Tail said, are we going to start the sweater this week? Yes, we're going to start this week. I'm excited. I can't wait to do the next one, the yoke sweater. I'm already thinking about that. That's going to be so much fun. Anybody else? All right. Bye-bye. See you next time. Happy knitting.